Hello, everybody. Welcome into the Apples and Genos Fantasy Hockey Podcast. My name is Nick Niblink. I'm the creator of Apples and Genos, originator of the Zero G Draft Strategy. And in this podcast, I will be identifying 8 players that I think are worth acquiring in Dynasty this offseason. Let's get it. Welcome on in, everyone. Unfortunately, I am solo here on this evening, trying to bring something to you that I've been doing actually at least 1 year, previous, maybe 2 years now. I've been bringing these Dynasty buys in the off season. It's a good time of year to do it, to think through which players might be kind of at a lull in their career, so to speak, might be down in public opinion, and therefore might represent a bit of a buying opportunity. I will also be doing corresponding players to sell in Dynasty episode. I did that last year as well. And yeah, it just seems like the right time of year to get this in. We're obviously in the midst of the Stanley Cup Finals, and a terrific finals it is. Must-watch television. If you're a fan of the PWHL like I am, you're watching the expansion news and all the excitement going on there. That's fun as well. Happy Pride Month as well to everyone out there celebrating that. It's a fun time in June. I was out watching my kids play at the park today. Weather was perfect. Couldn't have asked for better. Yeah, it's a good time of year. Everything is looking good out there. But some of these players that we're going to talk about today, everything did not look good for them this season. Usually when you talk about players to buy, there's a reason that you think you might be able to buy them for less than they're worth. It's usually because they had a bit of a down season in one regard or another. So that's what we're going to walk through here today. Some players, the case will be different for each of them. Some players, it just simply was they didn't produce. And we'll get into some of the reasons why it seems like that didn't happen for them this season, but we think there might be a bounce back in their future. Other players, could be just a coaching change or something along those lines that we expect will make a difference for them moving forward. But let's not waste any time. Let's get into it here. Number 1, Mathew Barzal. You've heard us talk about Barzal, very clearly a player that we like here at Apples and Genos, but did not have a great year. Only played 30 games, was injured pretty significantly for a lot of the year. I still averaged 20 minutes, 21 seconds average time on ice. Patrick Waugh is back behind the bench, so I don't expect that to really change materially going into next year. Only 6 goals and 20 points in those 30 games played. That's a 16-goal, 55-point pace. That's obviously very, very rough in terms of what you were hoping for when you drafted Mathew Barzal at the beginning of the year. On the season, 126th in shots per 60, 168 individual scoring chances, 4 per 60, 6th in Corsi, 4 per 60, 9th in on ice scoring chances, 4 per 60. So the advanced stats there, especially the on ice stats, are just elite, right? 6th in Corsi, 4 per 60, 9th in scoring chances, 4 per 60 when Mathew Barzal is on the ice. Things are happening at a really good clip for his team. That's also borne out in the microstats. You've heard Blake talk about this. He is a huge fan of Barzal, and it's easy to see why. If you're checking into these microstats, he just continually shows out. Year after year, this guy is a stud when it comes to the advanced stats. And so I just think that this is a player who we kind of saw the worst possible situation, right? This is a player who continually ranks among the NHL's elite in shot assists, chance assists, passes from center, high danger assists, all these kinds of things. And he's also a zone entry god to top it all off. So things are positively happening whenever Mathew Barzal is on the ice. It's just this year in particular, again, smaller sample, only 30 games played, but a 54% IPP, 7.7% shooting percentage, 9.8% on ice shooting percentage. Those are what we like to call the luck metrics, and by and large, these things tend to regress to the mean of the player's ability over the course of their career. And to put that kind of into context, right, 54% IPP for Mathew Barzal. He was involved in 54% of the goals scored when he was on the ice, getting either a goal or an assist. And to put that in context, his lowest number for IPP in any single season before this was back in 2020, 2021 when he had a 70% IPP, literally 16% worse than his previous career low. He spent many seasons. He has 3 seasons, 4 seasons above 76%, and then 3 seasons in the low 70s. So yeah, it's just a situation where it seems like a obvious insane outlier for him to be this inefficient in terms of factoring into the goals being scored when he's on the ice. His shots per 60 was pretty much in line with his career average. The shooting percentage at 7.7% is well below his career average. Probably, you expect 2 to 3%. He's never been an exceptional shooter for sure in terms of the conversion, but you do expect him to be at least around 10% on a year-end basis. Individual scoring chances 4 per 60. It's not the best situation he's ever had, but it's also not the worst. So it's kind of a middle-of-the-road individual scoring chances, but it's the on-ice stuff that really pops. He actually had the best Corsi 4 per 60 of his career and the second best on-ice scoring chances 4 per 60 of his career. That really shows out. The on-ice shooting percentage has not been good for a lot of his time in New York. You have to feel like the Islanders at least get a little bit lucky one of these years, even if they don't necessarily get better. But he could definitely stand to gain some natural positive regression in that regard. So I do think that there's a lot of ways really that this gets better for Barzal as soon as next year. I think that this is a player that you need to at least knock on the door, whoever's got him in your league, and say, hey, what would it take to get Barzal on my roster? The nice part is that he has Bo Horvat there. They've demonstrated some chemistry already. The tough part is that the Islanders are kind of in cap hell. They do have 21 million in projected cap space per Puckpedia for next year, but they do also have Noah Dobson and Alexander Romanov as RFAs that they probably need to sign. Probably at least one of those they try to do a bridge deal. The biggest problem with the Islanders right now is that they have Ryan Pulock, Adam Pelech, and Scott Mayfield all signed until at least 2029. All 3 of those guys are 30 years old or older. Scott Mayfield is signed at 3.5 AAV until he's 37. This is a guy who was scratched by Patrick Waugh this past year. Really tough look there. There's almost no way to get away from that. You can buy out the player, but then you're paying some lower amount for like the next 20 years. Maybe that they'll do that just to be out from under that contract. Pulock makes 6.15, Pelech makes 5.75. I don't think you could honestly say that either of those players returned value on those contracts this past year, and both of them have at least 4 more years left on those deals as they get past the other side of 30 here. Yeah, just a tough look in terms of what they're facing on the cap front from that perspective. So what does that really leave them in terms of the ability to go out this offseason and add to their forward group that pretty obviously needs it? Anthony Duclair was a bit of a bust. He's under contract at 3.5 for another 3 seasons. You still have Pierre Engvall on contract at $3 million for 4 more seasons. Tough look for the Islanders. Lou Lamoriello, very clearly one of the worst GMs in the league the past, 3-4 years at least. I know there was a lot of league-wide love for Lou Lamoriello. I'm sure he's a great person, but he was absolutely just dealing money to anybody and everybody and not players who really deserved it in his time in New York, and now they are feeling the effects of that. The one positive here that I will say, Callum Ritchie, the prospect acquired in the trade with the Avalanche for Brock Nelson, big time prospect there. He could join the team as soon as this year, maybe go straight to the top line, maybe provide a little bit of that spark on the left wing alongside with Barzal and Horvat, maybe provide a difference maker on the power play as well. That's at least a possibility here that I'm interested in seeing if that could come true. And yeah, there's also a chance that, they get one of Romanov or Dobson signed to a bridge deal, get that contract under control, and then they do actually go out and sign a halfway decent addition to the forward group here and provide themselves with a true top line with Barzal, Horvat, and an acquisition in the offseason here. So there are some ways that this could work. I'm hopeful for that, but either way, I think Barzal, at the very least, deserves much, much better than what he got this past season. I haven't done projections yet. We'll start getting into that once we have the major free agent landing spots, because those do affect the projections a fair bit. But once I get into projections, I assume that I'm going to have Barzal at least in the 70-point range, probably more likely in the 75 to 80-point range. I just think he can be a pretty efficient player, at least in terms of generating, chances for the players around him, even if he's not the greatest shooter himself. So Mathew Barzal, big time player that I am looking to acquire in my Dynasty leagues this offseason, and I think you should be as well. All right. Next up, Connor Bedard. This is probably not going to come as a surprise to anyone. Let's go through the stats here. I think everybody's mostly aware of what happened to Connor Bedard. 2017 average time on ice, scores 23 goals, 67 points in 82 games. It was a step back from the previous year for sure. 170th shots per 60, 222nd individual scoring chances 4 per 60, 272nd in on-ice Corsi 4 per 60, and 238th in on-ice scoring chances 4 per 60. Not a great year for Connor Bedard in that regard. That rhyme, very nice. It's just a spot where you have to feel bad for the guy enduring the first 2 seasons of his career in this situation in Chicago. Macklin Celebrini gets to walk into what actually turned out to be a pretty sweet situation in San Jose, and Connor Bedard is blessed with the likes of Philip Kurashev and Tyler Bertuzzi trying to turn them into top-line players. Unfortunately, it did not go well for Bedard this year. I think it is pretty true that teams really keyed on him as the only true top-level talent on this team, and he couldn't quite figure that out for the season. And it's not that unexpected, really. It's still a player who's not yet turned 20 years old. We talked about Connor Bedard in the second-year players episode. This is a player who we talked about in that episode, second-year players, right alongside Matthew Knies. Matthew Knies, if these two guys had gone to the same high school, Matthew Knies would have been the senior in the high school, like putting Connor Bedard upside down in the toilet, giving him a swirly, and Connor Bedard is still, he's got years to catch up to where some of these other players are at. And he's got plenty of years ahead of him for dynasty purposes, obviously. So I don't think that there's a lot to really say here. I think the case is pretty obvious. Connor Bedard, all the way up as a prospect, very much adulated all the way through, and with good reason. Just, truly generational numbers as he came up. I think this is really quite possibly your last chance to buy on Bedard before he becomes absolutely untradeable. Like, no one will even pick up the phone if you call on Connor Bedard. So this might be the last chance where somebody's like, yeah, it's not great that he, had this season where he couldn't quite figure it out. Maybe he's not like this 100+ point talent, 50+ goal scoring talent that I thought he was. And maybe I can get a haul for him here, what they think is a haul and what you think is actually a value for a player who actually could be, a player that we're taking in the first round of fantasy drafts for the next decade. Maybe not next season, but, a few seasons down the line. And Dynasty, obviously, you're thinking with a longer term view there. So that's my pitch to get Connor Bedard on your squads. I will say too, he did do very well, like well above average across the board. The shot assists, even though the shots were down, he was still providing shot assists. The microstats actually look really positive for him. The controlled entry percentage is sky high, so he's doing all of that really well. It's just, yeah, there's no one to pass it to when it came down to it. So get this man some real line mates, let him cook, and let's see what we can do, because I do think he's a pretty elite entry guy, all things considered, and he just needs some teammates to move the puck around. Help is on the way in Chicago, but they definitely need a few more pieces to come there. I saw another piece where they were talking about Nikolai Ehlers potentially being a Chicago target. I'd love that too. Just anyone with the talent to like not just dump it into the corner and not retrieve it is the bar is literally on the ground for a line mate for Connor Bedard to improve over what he has had to deal with the first 2 years in the league. So Connor Bedard, still fully expect this man to develop into a superstar in the National Hockey League. If there is a window here where somebody will at least listen to a trade offer, I would absolutely go in there, because this kind of player I don't think will be tradable once he has, any kind of uptick next season. He'll once again be just a completely untradeable asset. So last call on Connor Bedard. Number 3, Jack Hughes. Similar kind of situation here in that it might be, the last time you can actually send an offer that gets accepted for Jack Hughes. Let's dig through some of the stats here. 20 minutes, 54 seconds average time on ice. He scores 27 goals, 70 points rather, in 62 games played. That's a 36 goal, 93 point pace. Advanced stats, microstats, it all looks insane for Jack Hughes. Elite everything. 9th shots per 60, 16th individual scoring chances 4 per 60, 7th in Corsi 4 per 60, 3rd in on-ice scoring chances 4 per 60. You name the stat, Jack Hughes looks insane at it. The shots per 60, shot assists per 60, chance contributions, the cycle and forecheck offense per 60, the rush offense per 60, the zone entries, it's all like literally like 98th, 99th percentile stuff for Jack Hughes if you go by the microstats. So it's absolutely insane the kind of underlying stats that Jack Hughes is putting at. I would say that he actually got quite unlucky to only end up with the 36 goal, 93 point pace this year. I'm hoping that that means we'll get a discount on him in drafts. I could see him falling into the second round of a lot of drafts. There's obvious injury concerns after he hasn't been able to finish out the last few seasons. He's played 78 games in 22-23, but only 62 in each of the last 2 here. The 69% IPP this last year is significantly lower than the previous 3 years, 78%, 80%, 76% the previous 3 years. So that came down this year. I think there was a little bit of a learning curve with Sheldon Keefe's offense, but overall everything is still at an elite level, and I don't really see any reason to think that it shouldn't be just another insane year in terms of the chance generation, in terms of even the efficiency. I think should bounce back this year. I don't think Jack Hughes is an elite level shooter. He only has 1 year where he's above 13% in the league in terms of shooting percentage, but he's clips at 11.8 this past season. I think he can at least do that, and he might actually, second year in a Sheldon Keefe system, the shots per 60 might actually come back up a little bit. You might get even a little bit more volume to go with the just the time on ice and the chance generation that he brings alongside that. So all of that to say, I think this is a player with 110 plus point potential. Obviously, you have to weigh the risk for yourself. What is the risk here? The risk is that there is something, structurally unsound with Jack Hughes' body. We've seen multiple shoulder injuries. That is of concern. Just if you start to have a re-injuring the same body part over and over again, you start to wonder if that's a deteriorating condition, one that may never heal properly and may, decrease the not only the likelihood of the player playing all 82 games in any given season, but also the likelihood that they can reach their full potential fantasy-wise. So, yeah, I'm not saying I'm completely unconcerned about that. but I am saying that that's obviously pretty baked into what it will cost to acquire Jack Hughes this offseason. It may be that the current manager doesn't want to sell at this point, and that's totally understandable. But in a season where he paces for 93 points, where he gets injured again, and there's a lot of rhetoric in fantasy hockey circles about how he is, like, people are conclusively saying he's injury prone, he'll never play 82 games played ever again. We saw the same kind of stuff with Evgeny Malkin. He went like 10 years where he never played 82 games, and then I think it was like his age 35 season, he plays 82 and then does it again the next year, I think it was. Anyway, all that to say, I think there's a lot of years left in Jack Hughes' career. I think he probably does have a 110-point season in him at some point. If you can get him at a price that is less than that because of the risk here, and you're willing to take on some of that risk to try to swing big and get a superstar difference-making player on your fantasy roster, Jack Hughes is definitely a good way to do that. Moving right along, player number 4, Owen Tippett here. Mostly, this is about the time on ice here. So Owen Tippett was under 16 minutes, comes in at 15:59 average time on ice under John Tortorella this year. 20 goals, 43 points in 77 games played. Was still 44th in shots per 60, 73rd individual scoring chances 4 per 60, down at 167 Corsi 4 per 60, 189 in on ice scoring chances 4 per 60. I think that realistically, to get on board with Owen Tippett, and it's not hard to from a fantasy perspective, he does the things we like to see. He shoots, he hits. What more do you want from your fantasy player, especially if you're in some sort of bangers cats format? That's always going to feel good if you're adding hits there. The IPP 59% this year, 10.6% shooting percentage, 11.8% on ice shooting percentage. I think the on ice shooting percentage, that was actually the highest of his career, so I don't really think that that's going to, necessarily even stay that high. But I do think that under Rick Tocchet, things will stabilize to some extent. I think that the 59% IPP is probably on the lower side of what he's capable of. Again, it will depend who he's deployed with. The 9.2 shots per 60 this past year is easily the lowest of his last 3 years. And, the individual scoring chances for per 60, maybe a little bit more in line with what he's done previously, but I still see some room for Tippett to improve that given the right set of circumstances. 10.6% shooting percentage is actually, somewhat in line with what he's done in his career. He's never been a big time shooter. Goes in his basically he's only had 3 full seasons in the league, unless you go back to 21-22 and count that at 63 games played. But the last 3 years he's shot 11.7%, 9.7%, and now 10.6%. So 10.6 is in the middle there. That probably feels about accurate to what you should expect for Tippett moving forward. The big question here is if Tippett can get himself into Tocchet's good books and become a Tocchet favorite, because not only just in terms of the even strength time on ice, but he was down to 1 minute 56 in power play time on ice after being at 229 and 245 the previous 2 years. So obviously that's going to be a big time chunk of potential production that's just taken off the top. If you're not having this guy on a power play, on a top power play, getting him power play minutes, it's going to hurt you for fantasy no matter who you are. So the plan here for a Tippett resurgence is that Tocchet is actually into him as a guy on the power play who can bomb away and provide shots and disruption there. I'd love to see him, maybe develop even a bit of a net front game. He's not a small dude. He likes to throw the body around. He's not afraid of physical contact. So can you find yourself a role on this team? Can you find a way to impress your new coach here and become a bit of that player? That would be pretty interesting for me to see. I do think it's worth noting that the hope here is that he gets that extra power play time, and he gets some extra 5v5 minutes as well, and creeps into the 18-minute a night range, which would be huge for his fantasy production. Would probably also mean that he's playing with better players at even strength. So yeah, it would just raise the floor kind of across the board. Worth noting that Rick Tocchet has typically been a bit more of a forecheck, dump and chase style offense in his time in Vancouver, at least. And Tippett, at least from the microstats, looks to be a bit more of a rush offense kind of guy. And so, is that a perfect marriage in terms of the scheme that Rick Tocchet will bring to bear here? I don't know. So, that is at least one caveat with Owen Tippett. But I think that this is maybe a player now where the current manager, whoever is rostering Owen Tippett in your league, is like, he kind of is what he is, and they're willing to just see what else is out there, what they can get for Tippett. And if they feel like they're getting a fair price for who Tippett is, they feel like they've seen the ceiling for Tippett and they kind of know what he is and what he isn't. If that's where they're at, then you can probably make a fair offer here. You can get Tippett, and if he gets a little bit more ice time under Rick Tocchet, then you're kind of getting, above what you valued him at in your trade. So I think there's a case here for that with Owen Tippett, with the new coaching situation. If he can turn himself into a bit of a forecheck hound here, he's got the body type, he likes to throw the body. If he can kind of figure that piece of his game out, move himself up the lineup, as a result, establish himself as a favorite in Rick Tocchet's new system, then I do think there's a case to be made that Owen Tippett could have his best year yet in 2025-26. Number 5 is going to be Andrei Svechnikov. I do hear your collective groans out there. They're not lost on me. Everybody is feeling this way about Andrei Svechnikov after a season which he goes 1707 average time on ice, 20 goals, 48 points in 72 games played. Not the way we drew up the season for Svechnikov, and it feels like this has been the constant refrain with Svechnikov for so long now that I think this is where everybody is at. I think this is a player where everybody thinks, yeah, but he always gets injured for at least 10 games every year. He's done that for the last 3 years now, including longer stints in 22, 23, and 23, 24. And he's never going to get, 18 plus minutes a night. He only goes over 18 minutes average time on ice in 2022-23, was below 17 minutes last in 23-24, and just over 17 minutes in 24-25. And this year in particular really hurts for fantasy managers with only 20 goals in 72 games played, 23 goal, 55 point pace. I am just thinking that probably, even if this is the player that Svechnikov is to some extent, like he's never going to get the 18 plus minute a night treatment under Rod Brind'Amour, even if that's true, I am comfortable buying Svechnikov at what I think his current price will be in the general market out there. Prior to this season, he has an IPP of 63%, 65%, 68%. Then this year comes in at 56%. So huge drop off in the IPP. That alone would take him up into the 60 plus point range. But you also have the other stats here that look like they could rebound for him as well. He could get a little bit back on the on-ice shooting percentage. He could get a little bit back on his individual shooting percentage. Those two things could go his way. And yeah, Carolina, what will they do this offseason? Are they going to find a better distribution of ice time here? We talk about it every year. What I'm feeling is you're not going to have to pay for the what if with Svechnikov anymore. It's been enough years that I think people feel like they know what Svechnikov is. And so you're not actually paying for the what if with Svechnikov anymore. You're paying for what he is. And if you do get the what if scenario, even if you think that scenario only happens, 10% of the time where he actually does get over 18 minutes a night, even if if you think that scenario only happens 1 in every 10 possible versions of the upcoming season that could play out, it's still probably worth it to acquire him at this level because you're not paying that extra on that. And Svechnikov's still only 25 years old. You probably have another decade of useful fantasy production from a guy like this. And so I'm just willing to take that on at this price. I feel like people think Svechnikov is older than he actually is because he came into the league so young. He's played so many seasons already. He's still very young. He's still got a lot of seasons left to give you and your dynasty roster. So I do think that Svechnikov is a guy that you might want to invest in, especially if, like I said, people think they know exactly what Svechnikov is. Even if he is only that, you're kind of paying the going price. And if he's more than that at any point in the next decade, you're kind of playing with house money at that point. Microstats look really good on Svechnikov as well. That part, I think anyone can agree on. He fits the Carolina system really well. It's just the conversion has been consistently bad, and so at some point you do wonder if he'll ever have a good conversion year. More like pretty likely he will, just by law of averages. One of these seasons, he'll just like shoot 15% randomly. He'll have like a 70% IPP, and he'll go off for like 75 or 80 points along with those crazy hits that he always brings as well. And so, like, one of these years, he'll probably pop, and maybe that's the time in which it's actually a good time to sell him. But that season hasn't come yet, and so I think you can get Svechnikov at a reasonable price. And I mean, if you're watching on YouTube, this man isn't even smiling, and the dimples are still showing. Like, what are we doing here? You absolutely can't help yourself around a great mug like that. So basically, the case here with Svechnikov, this is the absolute floor this past season that we saw. Good chances managers fed up with him. Just 25 years old. Go and acquire yourself some Andrei Svechnikov. Number 6 is going to be Wyatt Johnston. Johnston actually had a pretty good season when all was said and done. Definitely heated up over the back half of the season, as basically all of Dallas did. 1856 average time on ice, 33 goals, 71 points in 82 games, 112th in shots per 60, but 14th in individual scoring chances 4 per 60, 176 Corsi 4 per 60, 53rd in on ice scoring chances 4 per 60. He rocks a 68% IPP, 16.3% shooting percentage, 13.2% on ice shooting percentage. I really like this player a lot, and I think it's going to be very interesting what happens in Dallas. Peter DeBoer being let go. It could be a situation in which Johnston goes from even like he gets 19 minutes a night here. What if he gets up to the 20 plus minute level? I think that's definitely in play for Johnston. Dallas has some big decisions to make this offseason. They are in a cap crunch now with Mikko Rantanen joining the fold. They have to add on the back end. They're pretty exposed by Edmonton, basically only having Thomas Harley, Miro Heiskanen, and then nobody else on the back end. So I think they're going to make that a priority, but that means that they're probably going to have to move on from some of their forwards. Tyler Seguin's still making big money. Mason Marchment has been talked about as a guy that they could try to move on from at $4.5 million just to create some cap space. All of this, I think you have to take into account when think about what the new Dallas Stars might look like next year. For myself, I'm really interested in as to what that might look like. You have the elite guy in Mikko Rantanen, you have the borderline elite guy in Jason Robertson, you have the power play specialist in Rupe Hintz, and I think Johnston is pretty locked in as the fourth member of that power play. There's always a chance. I probably shouldn't say that he's pretty locked in. There's always a chance, but it's a chance I'm really willing to take because I think he's pretty dynamite in a lot of the stuff that we like to look at here. Great rush player. I mentioned the individual scoring chances 4 per 60, so he's pretty much always going to have a high shooting percentage. He works that way. But what if the new coach actually does really lean on a top 6? It seems like they may have to kind of consolidate around a true top 6. What if he is, just a member of a true top 6 and top power play unit that all 4 of their real top guys there all get 20 minutes a night under a new coach? That's a pretty exciting thing to think about. It could be him and Robertson on one line. It could be Hintz and Rantanen on another. It could be any version of those lines getting mixed up. But I think that there are a lot of scenarios for Wyatt Johnston where he does have another gear left that we haven't seen so far. Again, I talked about Andrei Svechnikov being younger than people think that he is. Wyatt Johnston just turned 22 years old, which is kind of unbelievable to think about. But yeah, just a player that I think has a lot going for him. He has a subpar playoffs here. A lot was made of how poorly he played in the playoffs. I think he probably, he may have been injured for all we know, but I think he rebounds from that pretty conclusively in the upcoming year. And I think there's a real chance that things are even better for him than they were under Peter DeBoer. There's also some downside risk. I don't want to, downplay that too much, but I think that Wyatt Johnston is just a guy that I'm always going to be in on. The guys that can create these chances for themselves and convert at a high level, and have demonstrated that time and again and have been consistent with it. Wyatt Johnston absolutely has put himself in that tier of players for me, and I just want to be in on players like that. And if anyone's a little bit wary of the new coach, wary of the subpar playoffs that he just had, I am going to be in there for sure trying to acquire a 22-year-old stud player like this. Number 7, a little bit of a bone for the contending teams here who are looking for cheap veteran help. Steven Stamkos. I think we all know what happened in Nashville this year. Stamkos gets 18 minutes average time on ice, so pretty good in that regard. Not elite, but not bad. 27 goals, 52 points in 82 games played. Very disappointing in that regard. His shots were very down from previous years. Definitely true on that front. Below average in shots per 60 per all three zones. But what was interesting is his shot assists actually came way up. His chance assists come way up. He's doing more setup work in Nashville than he had previously. I think that there's still going to be a lot of pressure in Nashville, but I also think it's impossible that things go as poorly for Nashville as they did this past season. Yeah, it really seemed like it was just the absolute worst case scenario across the board. I think that Steven Stamkos has another gear still at his, advanced age here. How old is Steven Stamkos? Steven Stamkos is 35 years old. And to be honest, I don't really see that he's taken some huge step back in terms of his ability. I see that it was a weird fit in Nashville and they never quite figured it out. And they've got a whole offseason here to, go back to the drawing board and try to get it sorted. Maybe, there's other moves that go on. Jonathan Marchessault has been rumored to be potentially available via trade. And maybe that, opens some things up. They can move Stamkos around. They can add a true second line center, which would potentially allow Stamkos to play on the wing where he's more comfortable. He played a lot of center this year, which I think kind of messed with him, going back and forth between left wing and center at times. Just not an ideal scenario in that regard. It is a weird fit still, I think, with Forsberg and Stamkos on the same power play unit, but hopefully they can find, there are versions of this where you have the one-timer king and you have the just general chance-producing guy on the same power play, and it works for other teams, so it feels like they should be able to figure this out. I still think Andrew Brunette, might not be, as per the evidence put on tape by Nashville this year, he might not be like necessarily the best coach in the league, but I think he's still a good coach for fantasy. He likes his teams to generate lots of looks, to generate lots of chances, and they do that pretty consistently in Andrew Brunette's relatively brief coaching career so far. So I think that should be a positive for Stamkos next year. I just don't see it going as poorly as it did this past season once again. And so I view Steven Stamkos as a buy, especially on contenders, where obviously you're thinking with a short-term window here, probably only the next couple of years you're really focused in on. Can I get Steven Stamkos at a low point where, if somebody's looking to move off him, they're thinking, I got to get off him while he still is scoring scoring 27 goals, he might go down to 20 goals next year. I don't think we're in danger of that quite yet. I still think he should score at the very least 25 goals, maybe 30, best case scenario, probably 35. But he could also add some more assists. Just general production, I think, is in the cards for Stamkos next year. I don't think he's washed yet. I'm not really seeing that from the data that I'm looking at. I think that Nashville, it is pretty unbelievable how bad Nashville was at finishing just in general. 10.1% on ice shooting percentage. That should not happen on a team that has the caliber of players they have here. Stamkos himself, still converted at 15.5% shooting percentage. That's pretty in line with what he's done in his career. So I don't see a big fall off there. I think it was just a weird fit, and it took a lot of time to figure out what they wanted to do. They don't have a second line center. I do expect them to address that in the offseason. If they don't address that, then yeah, that would be concerning. But I do expect them to make some plays in that regard and start to piece together a little bit more of an NHL caliber top six that can give Stamkos multiple looks, and they can kind of figure out what the best version of this top six looks like for them moving forward. I just think there's got to be some versions of this that look a lot better next year than they did this past year, and I think we see that in the upcoming season. Even just UC Saros having a bounce back season, if he can be an above average goaltender once again, that would actually be pretty huge, I think, for the Nashville Predators. Just keeping the puck out of your own net and getting it turned around and going in the right direction again. I think if they can just start to do some of that, I think they'll be in a much better spot. And I think that at the very least, it should be better than last year. I don't think that's too much to ask from this group. I think it will be. How much is definitely up for debate, but I don't think Stamkos is done just yet. I do view him as a buy for contending teams in Dynasty. Last player on the list, coming full circle back to the New York Islanders, it's Noah Dobson. 23 minutes, 16 seconds average time on ice, scores 10 goals and 39 points in 71 games played. 45-point pace there. Definitely not the season you were hoping for from Noah Dobson. He still comes in at 6th amongst all defensemen in shots per 60, 38th in individual scoring chances for per 60, 22nd in Corsi for per 60, 26th in on-ice scoring chances for per 60. Some strong stuff there in the advanced stats from Dobson, despite the team environment being pretty terrible. 49% IPP, 5.1% shooting percentage, 9% on-ice shooting percentage. I think there's some potential positive regression there for Dobson for sure. Similar to Barzal, right? Talked about how they do have some cap crunch problems that they might need to figure out here. But there's also been some rumors of Dobson being traded this offseason. What if they work out some deal, the Leafs find a way to shed Morgan Riley's contract, and they go out and acquire Noah Dobson in a big deal. That's a pipe dream for sure, but imagine Noah Dobson on the Leafs power play, how his stock would instantly rise. There are some crazy scenarios here with Noah Dobson where his value is just immediately so much higher than it is today. I will say the 49% IPP was the lowest of his previous 4 years, so I do expect even a little bit of bounce back in that regard. I think that the shooting percentage was the lowest at the past 4 years as well, so that could bounce back. Same goes for the on-ice shooting percentage. So like I said, some positive regression likely coming in the luck metrics. He outperforms the environment in the microstats as well. So I like that part with Dobson too. I don't think this is a player that you need to especially with the way that the Islanders defense looked this season. I feel like Noah Dobson in a healthy season, in a full season, is probably still their best defender. He actually doesn't look terrible in the defensive microstats. It's not like, he's not Jacob Slavin or Gus Forsling out there by any stretch, but the denials per 60 and the denial percentage is actually pretty high with him on the zone entries on the defensive side. So that part is actually positive for Noah Dobson, which is not something that I think a lot of people think of when they think of Noah Dobson. And obviously, big time shot producer, big time rush offense producer. He does have those kinds of things in his corner as well. So really, it comes down to, can the Islanders add something on amongst their forwards to kind of bring up the scoring firepower that they have? If they can do that this offseason, then I think there is still a 60 plus point ceiling case for Noah Dobson as soon as next year. But really, over the course of his career for Dynasty is what you're thinking about. And over the course of his career, like, I think if Noah Dobson was in Evan Bouchard's situation, that he would be posting some fairly similar numbers. I really don't think they're like that far off of each other in terms of true talent. I think that it's a lot more to do with situation. Obviously, it doesn't hurt Bouchard just getting to learn from the world class talents of McDavid and Draisaitl and learning to play off them. But yeah, I think that sometimes we overrate players just based on who they get to play with on an everyday basis, and we don't do the same necessarily for Noah Dobson, considering the cast of misfits that he's had to play with in his situation there on Long Island. I will say, there is still the Tony DeAngelo factor there. DeAngelo joined the team, was on the power play while Dobson was off, and then kind of held on to power play one. They were actually playing together on the top power play unit at the end of the year there. So something to watch there. DeAngelo is not under contract, so he's an unrestricted free agent once again, and we'll see if the Islanders think they want to bring him back, or what they're going to do with all the defense and all those contracts that I mentioned at the top of the episode. Let's see what this offseason brings here. But Noah Dobson, over the course of his career, I think will have multiple 60-point seasons, maybe 70-point seasons still, given the right situation. Still just 25 years old. You probably got a decade's worth of fantasy relevant production for Noah Dobson left here. So if you can acquire this guy at anything more towards the 45-point pace of this past season versus the 70-point pace of seasons prior, I'm definitely exploring that option. Let's see what new GM Mathew can do this offseason to add some firepower and see if that raises Noah Dobson's stock moving forward. Well, that is all 8 players that I am thinking about buying this offseason in Dynasty. If you made it this far, click the link in the description, join the Discord community, come tell me who you are interested in buying this offseason, or leave it in the comments here. Comment, subscribe, review, rate, or like, whatever you can do. It really does help us out. So drop those comments, whether you do it in the Discord, or you do it on the YouTube, or you do it on the Spotify episode, wherever you can. Tell us what you are thinking in terms of Dynasty buys this offseason. That's going to be all that I've got for this episode. Hopefully it brought you some value, helped you get a little bit better at fantasy hockey today. All the advanced stats you heard today came from Natural Stat Trick, which is a terrific free resource, and all the microstats are from all 3 zones. Many thanks to the band there for supplying the music for the podcast. Be sure to check out their Spotify as well. That's it, folks. Much love.